Hello, welcome to PSI. This video hopefully will shed some light on some of the rumours, some of the hearsay and some of the lies that are going around about the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine. You may have seen the programme that was shown on Netflix, the documentary style programme, and it didn't make the Warrens look very good towards the end. Now, the Warren Foundation don't normally respond to things, but because so much negativity was going around and people were even contacting members of the Warren Foundation for paranormal research, asking various questions and being negative, they decided to put a video together and explain everything that has been going on. So don't take my word for it. Here is Chris, the grandson of the Warrens, and Jeff, one of the main directors of the Warren Foundation. Check it out, guys.
Sure. I definitely want to address the whole Judy Penny and all of that crap. I want to address Netflix, and I really want to address that because if you pay attention to the beginning, they even say that the family doesn't get along. They don't talk to one another. They don't agree with one another on any of this.
Right.
And then at the end, two of them do say some bad things about my
Let's go ahead and start with that. So obviously the Netflix special came out recently, and like you said, the first 45 minutes or so of the documentary is great, I think. But then at the end, it definitely took a turn towards bashing the Warrens, and it was primarily centered around two people. I mean, one mainly
Carl Gloss. And Carl was the eldest son. He didn't believe any of this was taking place when it was taking place. Even though, if you pay attention to the first 45 minutes, every single person on there says Carl's wrong. They don't call him out by name, but they're indicating him. What really bugs me is as soon as the first Conjuring movie came out, Carl sued my grandmother because he wanted money. And he lost his case. And so he started selling off items from the house, including a rocking chair that he sold to the Baggins fellow on Ghost Adventures.
Oh, okay.
And that is in his museum now, which, is obviously a ripoff of the Warren Museum. He's often saying that he's got things from the Warren Museum in there, which of course he doesn't, including this chair. He indicates it's from the Warren Museum, even though it's not. A lot of people think the Annabelle is in there, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of misinformation because once you become famous, people are going to attack you.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, I think he's a very damaged person. He was saying that his mother was drugging him and his family, which then he comes up with this idea of no-dose or whatever it was.
Yeah.
There's no proof of that. He doesn't even have any proof of that. It's just bullcrap. He then says that my grandparents took the family out to Hollywood and wined and dined them. My grandparents were dead when the Conjuring 3 movie came out. He's talking about Dick Clark, who had his own television production company and invited the family out there, not my grandparents. They had absolutely nothing to do with that. Invited the family out there to talk about doing a movie, which became known as the Demon Murder Case. It starred Andy Griffith playing a character based on my grandfather without my grandfather's name, and Kevin Bacon, who played the character based on Arnie Johnson. It ends without any resolution, the movie, because the trial hadn't even taken place as far as I could tell. Um, but my grandparents had nothing to do with that. The family profited from that, and that was fine. It was their case.
Yeah.
There's some kind of talk about the family signing over their rights to the book. That's bullcrap. Any books that my grandparents did always were shared equally between the author, the family, and my grandparents. My grandparents didn't get paid to help people. They got paid for doing lectures and for doing books. That's how they were able to have the free time to help people.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that, except, of course, I do take exception to publicizing cases, which is why we don't do that in the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents weren't perfect people, but they were people motivated by helping others.
Right.
One thing that bugs me also, they started doing this, hell, my grandmother was a child, my grandfather was a child when they first started having their first experiences and trying to understand what they were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
They started NESPR, the New England Society for Psychic Research, in 1952, but they had already been going on investigations from 1948 or even 46 on. So they didn't have their first big public moment until 1972's Lindley case in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They did everything in the dark. Nobody knew who they were.
Right.
Their first lecture wasn't until 68 or 69 when they were artists. That's how they supported themselves, as well as, my grandfather was a bus driver and he had many other jobs. But they were asked to do a benefit for the town of Monroe where they lived and to show their paintings and talk about what the paintings were about, the cases that they were on. And that's how they got started on doing lectures. So, to say that they were motivated by fame or greed or any of these things, when they spent 2 decades doing this without anybody knowing who they were, that's just insane.
Yeah. And they really, really got attacked. So maybe we can talk about this Vox article a little bit. They really got attacked as being greedy and making everything up. And so one question I've always had. So Amityville wasn't necessarily their case, correct?
Right. No, they were invited into that case by Channel 5 News.
Right. And they were only there for a very, very short time, right?
That's right. They were first, actually, the night they were invited in, they were actually attacked, both of them, in their house.
Yeah.
You can see that on the Warren Files. I did an entire program on it. Yeah. But they went in with Channel 5 News. Channel 5 is who took all the photos that are in there. My grandparents didn't take any photos.
Because that's one thing that's mentioned in that article specifically, is that they faked the photo of that boy in the doorway. And they didn't even take that picture. That was taken by the news crew that was there, correct?
Yeah, it was a news photographer, period.
Yep. And they didn't find it until he was reviewing the footage and the photos and things like that. So so that's one thing that's wrong right there in the article.
People have said it was me.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep.
It was 1977, so I would have been 12 or 13.
Okay.
There was no way in hell I was going into that house.
Yeah.
And normally I won't try to defend anything because it just gets the trolls all riled up and they love that. But this time I just feel like, because I was involved in the Netflix documentary, I want to address that. And because this other thing that keeps getting brought up about my grandparents being groomers and pedophiles, you know where that got started?
I think I do, but why don't you tell the story? Didn't that come from when the producer of The Conjuring wasn't hired to do The Conjuring 2?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he went out and he got Gerald Brittle and he got Judy Penny. Now, Judy Penny was a woman who lived above my grandparents in an in-law apartment. She was there to take care of the animals and take care of the house and answer the phones when my grandparents were off doing lectures and everything else. This was in the 70s and early 80s.
Right.
So, no grooming going. The woman was my mother's age. So in the 70s, let's see, she would have been in her 30s.
Okay.
Come on. There wasn't anything going on there anyway. She was just a woman, who worked at a bank and took care of the house when my grandparents weren't there.
Yeah,
But
that's been a crazy story, and a lot of people just go with it. I mean, they don't
I know.
look it up, and
And she has been selling off things that she had of my grandparents for years. And she got married and she moved down to, I think, Tennessee or something. And that's fine. But when the movies came out, she and Gerald Brittle, who had written The Demonologist and Devil in Connecticut, wanted to profit with this producer who had gotten fired. They teamed up. Gerald did get paid, actually. He got a good chunk of money, like $175,000. But the other two didn't get a thing because they didn't deserve anything.
Yeah. So now I'm just kind of going through this article. Did your grandfather ever claim to be an exorcist?
Of course not. He wouldn't ever do that. He was a Catholic. He didn't think he could do that.
Right. Because that's one thing in the article. It says that, and I've heard people say he was a horrible exorcist and all this other stuff. And it's like, I don't think I've ever heard him claim to be an exorcist.
No, he would never do that. He didn't believe he had the right to do that. Now they would work with Taoist monks, with rabbis, with Methodists, with Lutherans, but my grandfather was smart enough to know that he wasn't spiritual enough to do any of that kind of thing. And he wasn't an ordained minister. He felt you had to be a man of God to do that kind of work.
Yeah. Yep. Another claim in this article is, so how long were your grandparents involved in the Conjuring case? Because according to this article, I read somewhere that it said they were only there for 40 minutes.
The Conjuring case for years.
Okay.
For years. Now, I'm not an expert on that case at all. Now, they were in the Enfield house for only a few days. That was the second Conjuring movie. Yeah. Amityville, I think they were only in there for one full day. But as far as I remember, actually, I think the Lutzes did come to my grandparents' house one day, and I was there, and we had a picnic, I think.
Okay.
But other than that, yeah, their engagement in Amityville itself was rather limited. They said it was as close to hell as they ever hoped to get, and they never wanted to go back in that house.
Yeah. So, and that's been a controversy for a long time. I mean, ever since it started, there's allegations that it was a big hoax.
Yeah, well, the lawyer wanted money.
Right.
And he basically stopped the Lutzes from ever getting a penny from any of the movies, the book, anything. They never got a thing.
Yep. Were your grandparents involved with that book?
No. Although I know that they're mentioned in the bibliography.
Okay.
They did help as consultants on the Amityville 2, which was about the DeFeo case.
Okay.
See that they're credited on that movie, but that's as far as I know.
Okay. Yeah, that's mentioned in the article. Another controversial case that your grandparents were involved with is the Smurl case.
That was my case.
But there's a lot of people that think that was faked and bullcrap, and
no,
again, they made money on that accordingly. So
I was there.
That one.
I've recorded pig noises. I got levitated off the stairs in that house. I was in college at the time, and I had to take rides from anybody I can get. And this poor guy named Doug brought me, and we were sitting at the top of the stairs while everybody else was asleep, and all of a sudden, one of the bedroom doors starts to slowly close, and he was terrified. I said, "Just open it again," and he didn't. He wouldn't touch it for anything. So no, that was a very, very, very real case.
Yeah. So what do you think? Okay, so there was a movie made about that one. Was the movie accurate or was it garbage?
I barely remember it.
Okay.
I think it's based on the book more than it's based on reality. And I know that Mrs. Schmerl didn't think the book was that great. Honestly, remember, none of these books were written by my grandparents. Some
Right.
of them were excellent. In a Dark Place, which is about the Snedeker case, I was the lead investigator. I was there 9.5 weeks every single night except one.
Mhm.
And that book is a piece of garbage. It doesn't represent the truth at all. I can't stand it. I hate being associated with it. I was in the first edition, and I think that was the book that made me make sure that I was never in any subsequent editions of any of their books.
Okay.
I'm in the Schmerl case. I'm in Satan's Harvest. You have a copy of it.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
but
So here's
in
here's a,
subsequent editions.
here's a direct allegation about that. So
Which one?
about the haunting in Connecticut.
Okay.
So the author, his name is Garton.
Yeah, he said that my grandfather told him just make it scary.
Right. What do you respond? How do you respond to that?
I gave Garton 9.5 weeks worth of detailed notes, minute by minute, of every single thing that took place while I was investigating that case. Instead, he comes up with the idea that a gargoyle scared my fellow investigator and sodomized my fellow investigator while I passed out on the table. It's unbelievably stupid, and he ignored all of the facts.
Okay.
He just is blaming my grandfather for his mess. That case was so terrifying, there was no reason to have gone the way he went. It is a piece of garbage.
So, and did your grandparents made money on that book?
I don't know.
I mean,
I assume they made some money.
Yeah, because he was basically told to tell their story of that case.
Well, that was, yeah. I mean, three of it would have been the Snedekers, my grandparents, and the author sharing the rights to the book. But I have no idea, what amount of money. My grandparents wouldn't discuss that kind of thing with me.
Yeah. Yep. So I think you already talked about this. It looks like Carl Glatzel sued your grandparents.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you talked.
Well, sued my grandmother. My grandfather was already dead.
Okay.
And he lost.
And he sued him over the book, saying that it was complete lies. Okay.
He says that, but David and Arnie all back it up as being absolutely accurate. And honestly, Gerald Brittle, he was a very good writer. I think he did a great job on those two books that he wrote.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I reread The Demonologist, and you can see they're feeding into the whole horror aspect. You got to keep in mind this was the 70s and 80s and satanic panic, and my grandfather was definitely buying into the idea of far more demonic activity than I see in the work today.
Yeah.
I think he mellowed out in the 90s and realized that that wasn't quite accurate. But anybody who thinks that we're all experts out here and doing this with, complete knowledge of what we're dealing with is fooling themselves. This is a growing field of research, and we have to adapt with the evidence we're given.
Another thing too, somebody named, let's see, Penny, which we talked about a little bit,
right,
says that your grandfather was extremely abusive to your grandmother.
That's bullcrap. That is such bullcrap. My grandmother would never put up with that.
Yeah.
They were devoted to one another.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, she seems like a meek, kind, sweet lady, but I don't see her putting up with that.
No,
Honestly, I don't see your grandfather doing that. I mean, I think your grandfather was a very stern man, but with morals and respect, and he's not going to go beating women or, you know.
no, he wasn't even stern exactly. He was a type A personality.
Yeah.
So he would yell about, "Come on, Lorraine, let's get going," But my grandmother was this one who was just like, "Okay, dear," and then just ignore him for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It was so funny to watch. But
Yeah.
I saw my grandmother when two researchers who were close to my grandfather disrespected her. Holy goodness. That woman had a back of steel. I mean, she just would not put up with that.
Yeah.
No, that there's not a chance in hell. I never ever saw one piece of evidence. And if I had, I'd have gone at my grandfather with a baseball bat. I'm sorry. I mean, none of us have ever once ever thought anything like that.
Yeah. So here again, it sounds like in all of these cases and all of these stories that all of these allegations, I guess, it seems to be one or two people versus multiple. You know what I mean? I don't think it's fair that people are taking the word of one person over 10.
Well, David Glotzel does make a comment. Now, I don't know if it's an accurate comment based on how it was edited, because I know how much information I put into that particular interview and how little actually is there. But something along the lines of that my grandparents were profit driven at the end when there was a book involved. I know that my grandparents would have treated the family fairly. You have to remember that David was only 11 or 12 at the time.
Yeah.
For the most part, everything else David says is very glowing of my grandparents. Mm-hmm. If he feels that there was some kind of mistreatment at the back end, well, honestly, it could be misinterpretation, or maybe my grandparents, they were definitely driven to be well known, so that they could reach more people in need. That was this was before before the internet and before computers.
Yeah.
There was only one way to do it, and that was to get on television.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
but everyone in that household believed that this defense would work for Arnie because they had overwhelming evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone forward.
Yep.
And that's what bugs me. I didn't believe in that defense. And I warned my grandfather, but they all believed in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry. Carl is just this bitter, obviously bitter. It shows up in the interview.
Yeah.
Person who blames his entire family. They don't talk to one another. They don't interact at all. He wanted to get rich over something that happened to his brother and his sister's husband.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's kind of disgusting.
Yeah. The dad of the family is mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
As like he didn't believe that David was possessed as well. Do you have any more insight into that? Like why?
Only can tell you this is a very typical response of fathers on cases. They're the ones, men tend to be the protectors who are very logical, and they are not open-minded to the paranormal. So it's always the children and the women in the house that are first affected. It takes time before the father finally agrees, and he did.
Yeah.
It isn't as though he never believed. He believed once the evidence became overwhelming.
And wasn't he away a lot?
Huh?
Didn't his job take him? He was away from home a lot, right?
Yeah, well, he started to work 2 jobs, I believe, and he was trying to escape from this, which is a typical male response.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is just bull crap. I am not going to deal with this. I'm going to go out to the garage and just ignore it.
Right.
And even in the Snedeker case, for instance, the haunting in Connecticut case, It took time before Al believed what was going on, but then the man bravely admitted he actually got sodomized. And this is a guy that worked in a rock quarry.
Yep.
Can you imagine having to go to work after admitting that in public?
Yeah. Was all of that before there was any money motivation? I mean, I don't think he's making it up, but like, I mean, he wasn't motivated to share that story once they thought some money could be made, correct?
Which case are we talking about?
The Snedekers?
Oh no. He reported it to me during the case.
Okay. And there was a talk show. What talk show was that?
I believe it was Sally Jesse Raphael, I believe.
Yeah. That was a pretty good. Granted, we all know how those shows were back then. I mean, they were gotcha TV, but like they really, a lot of the neighbors were involved and really seemed vindictive and hateful, and for some reason, and I, I guess watching that show, I believe the family over the neighbors that said nothing happened.
I'll tell you something. There was this woman who lived in the upstairs apartment of the house, and she told me, and she let us all check out her apartment. She told me she was also being sexually attacked, but she was enjoying it.
Because she said on the record that nothing ever happened to her.
Yeah. Well, here's a personal story that might make people believe me a little better. I actually ended up meeting this nice English nanny, and I went out with a friend of mine and his date and the nanny. It was our first date. And we went to this restaurant, and lo and behold, the woman from upstairs was our waitress. She got us thrown out because she was so embarrassed and angry about our being there. But yeah, this is the same woman who told me that she was enjoying it.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. And just state this for the record one time. I think most everybody on the planet knows this. But the Conjuring universe, all the movies, they're all just, I mean, it's Hollywood. It's
Hollywood. They're based on real cases.
Right.
The details are all wrong. Yep. And nobody should think that they're learning anything about my grandparents. My grandfather doesn't play the guitar. He doesn't sing. They did dance together a lot. Yeah. That was real.
Yeah.
And Patrick is a great actor, but he never met my grandfather. I think Vera does a very nice job of portraying my grandmother the way that she's written in the movies. But like in Conjuring 3, there was no satanic witch. There was none of that crap.
Yep.
No, those are just fantasies. But especially like the nun doesn't exist. The Annabelle stories are ridiculous. Annabelle's real, but those movies, no, forget it. Somebody said something about those movies sanitized my grandparents. It's like, well, my grandparents aren't superheroes, and they had feet of clay like anybody else. They made mistakes, and I own up to that. They were driven by publicity at some points, and I didn't like that. Mm-hmm. We do it differently. But having said that, I believe that their motivations were always motivated by helping people. And my grandmother was always a very deeply spiritual Catholic woman who cared about everybody. They both would drop anything to help anyone, whether it be an animal or a person.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I met Andrea Perrin about 6 months ago, I think. And I had always heard that there was beef between their family and the Warrens.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
And I asked her about it. She said, absolutely not. She said, yeah, there was some feelings there for a while, but your grandma actually went out to lunch with her one day.
Oh,
and they had a fantastic conversation. And if I remember right, your grandma apologized for, all of the extras, the publicity and the garbage that went on, and Andrea accepted it, and they were friends, so.
You got to keep in mind, this was the 1960s. My grandparents still were just barely figuring everything out themselves.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yep.
They were the pioneers course. And I had the benefit of their knowledge, and then I took it, and yeah, I got rid of a lot of it, but that's because I didn't have to go through all the steps they went through. I got to skip ahead.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to look at these pioneers and try to judge them by all of the mistakes they made. There are always mistakes when you're dealing with the unknown.
Yeah.
Hell, look at Columbus. He thought he was going to India.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing too. I mean, we in modern society, we definitely have way more access to research and equipment and quality video within a compact situation. Your grandparents, they had big movie cameras, these big recorders with microphones and reel to reel stuff.
Well, they used reel to reel, and then they used a cassette recorder, and they almost never had cameras. Almost never.
That was something that was, I think, in a comment on the article, is that if all these accusations about all these cases being a hoax or being made up, and they know that your grandfather recorded everything, how's come these recordings have never come out?
They have audio recordings of the interviews and stuff, but my grandfather was a terrible record keeper. There are cassettes and reel-to-reel tapes that Tony Spira has access to. He's the only one who has access to.
Right.
He's told me that he doesn't have much. I don't know whether I believe that or not. So I can't answer that. I haven't seen it.
Yep. And to be honest with you, a lot of tapes from that time period, if they weren't preserved and kept in the right conditions and stuff like that, they're probably destroyed.
Garbage now anyway, yeah.
Or if you attempted to play them, you would destroy them. So that's a tough one. So is there anything else that you wanted to say? Because I think we hit it. I think the main thing is people were really upset with how the Netflix documentary ended.
Yeah, and I understand that. I finally got to see it. I'm disappointed.
Yep.
I think they tried to be balanced. I understand that. That happens all the time on interviews as well. They bring in that one gotcha person who's going to try to say that it's not real.
Yep.
I guess the only thing I'd like to say is my grandmother and I started this foundation together. We did it with the best of intentions to expand the ethical treatment of people in need and making sure that they're not being taken advantage of, not being hurt, and they're getting the help they need.
Yep. What is towards the end, what was your grandma's thoughts about going public? Because I thought you told me one time that she acknowledges that probably was a bad idea in a lot of cases, going public.
Honestly, that may be true. I don't remember now.
Okay.
I've had a lot of conversations with my grandmother.
Yeah.
She knows how I felt about it. My grandfather definitely knew how I felt about it.
Yeah.
I went to a house in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Now, my grandparents were not responsible for this one going public. The woman in the house had contacted the police about what was going on before she had contacted anyone else.
Yeah.
And it got on the police blotter, was picked up by the local newspaper as a haunted house. And when we arrived, there were hundreds of cars in this neighborhood, all trying to get in and begging us to let them in. I'm like, are you out of your minds? Go home. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But it put a bad taste in my mouth for any kind of publicity. I just can't stand it.
Yep. And I'm not a public figure or famous or anything like that, but I've had that experience too, where you set up an investigation and you get there and all of their friends are there. Like you're the live ghost adventures for the night. And that, immediately it's like, okay, either they go or I go, because this isn't happening this way. This isn't how this works. But
no.
So.
Yeah, no, that's not why we do what we do. And I want people to understand the Warren Legacy Foundation carries on my grandparents' name, but we do it our way.
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes we do talk about cases, but we never reveal identities, because some of the education from these cases is beneficial to.
Oh, absolutely. And we tell our clients that up front.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll talk about cases that are public, like Maurice Theriault or the Lutzes or the Snedekers, because they're already public.
Yep. Yep.
But other than those, no, never, ever will I do that.
Yep.
None of us will.
Right. So, all right, I can't think of anything else.
One other thing.
Yeah.
People should understand, just like my grandparents, we don't charge for our services.
Right.
My grandparents never took a penny from anyone for their work, and neither will we.
Yep. And I think there in that article, there are accusations that, how can they say they never charged anybody when they basically saying that they were rich? I mean, I don't think they were rich. I think they were comfortable. They probably got more money once the movies came out, but I mean.
No, that's also not true.
Okay.
The deal that was made for the very first movie was a poor deal because nobody believed that these things were going to make money. But the way it was written was, as long as they make a movie every 3 or 4 years, then the family will never get a large chunk of money. For every movie, according to my family, for every movie that comes out, they get less than $100,000.
Really?
Which my grandmother's medical bills and having a live-in nurse in the house, that took every penny that came in. They weren't comfortable. If you see their house, it's a very small home.
Okay.
It's got an attached art studio, but the house itself is a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, and a bedroom with another side office. That's it.
Okay.
There's the in-law apartment upstairs, which is only 2 rooms as well. I lived in it. It's puny, but that's it. That's their great home and on a dead end in Monroe, Connecticut.
Yeah.
It's not like, and the ramshackle homes all around it, it's not a great neighborhood or anything. They weren't living high on the hog. They never owned a brand new car. My grandmother did get to enjoy money from the first Conjuring movie, and she fixed up a car that had been rotting in their garage for over 50 years, which I thought would never get fixed. And she basically blew every penny that they made on the first movie fixing up this car.
Yeah. Yep.
So as you saw in the video, Chris stated that he started the Warren Foundation for Paranormal Research with his grandmother, Lorraine Warren, in 2014. Now they have come on a long way since the days of Ed and Lorraine investigating. Chris McKinnell seems like a genuine person, down-to-earth man. He's trying to carry on a legacy what him and his grandmother started. They wanted to be able to help people around the world for free. You've heard it straight from the horse's mouth. I hope this clears up a lot of things for everyone, because people do start jumping on the bandwagon, they start making false accusations, and it can land them into trouble. So this video hopefully will help explain most of the questions what everybody's been asking. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys, but for now, take care. You've seen it here first on PSI. Please subscribe to the channel and become a member of the channel by pressing the join button.